At 0547 local, on the Provosky axis in eastern Ukraine, a Russian rifle company rolls toward a Ukrainian trench line. 30 dismounts, 2 BMPs, a textbook assault on what their commander briefed as a lightly held platoon position. What he doesn't know is that the defenders in those firing pits have been watching his advance on thermal since he crossed the start line, and not one of them has a pulse. The 2 BMPs halt at 600 meters. 30 dismounts pour out of the MTLBs behind them, rifles at the low ready, bounding forward in short rushes toward the tree line. Fog covers them out to about 250 meters, but that doesn't matter, because the thermal optic in the firing pit sees straight through fog, and whatever's looking through it has never once been scared. The lead Russian squad makes it 250 meters before the first tracer arrives. 4 rounds of 50 caliber in half a second, like someone dragging a jackhammer sideways across the skirmish line at waist height. Dirt erupts down the length of the Russian front. The squad is flat on the ground in 3 seconds. No muzzle smoke, no silhouette, just tracers pouring out of a firing pit with nothing visibly moving around it. The second squad tries to bound forward and catches the next burst mid-rush. Same pit, same rhythm, same result. They hit the dirt and empty magazines at a muzzle flash nobody can actually pinpoint. Third burst. The platoon sergeant rises to a knee to wave the trail squad forward and watches tracers snap past his shoulder before he even finishes the hand signal. Whatever's in that pit swung onto him the instant he moved. He's back on the ground so fast his rifle bounces off his plate carrier. 25 seconds into contact, the Russian company commander is staring at his tactical display, processing a thought no one in his army has said out loud before. Whatever's shooting at them tracks movement faster than a human ever could. Half a mile back, roughly 9 football fields behind that firing pit, in a reinforced bunker cut 30 feet into the Donetsk clay, a Ukrainian operator named Kovalenko sips cold coffee, rolls his shoulders, and walks his crosshairs onto the next Russian who moves. Hornet 1 has been in this fight for 25 seconds and hasn't needed to take cover once. That's because this machine gunner isn't like any other gunner in the Ukrainian army. It isn't human. The firing pit those tracers are coming from holds a droid TW-127, a tracked chassis about the size of a riding lawnmower, 1.1 tons, with a stabilized turret mounting a Browning M2 heavy machine gun in 50 caliber, an American design from 1933 that's still the meanest. 50 cal on any battlefield, now bolted onto a Ukrainian robot they build faster than Russia can destroy them. The ballistic computer solves lead, drift, drop, and range faster than a human gunner can blink, like autocorrect, except instead of fixing spelling, it's adjusting bullet trajectory 400 times a second. The thermal optic cuts through fog, and the AI flags a target the instant a single pixel moves. It's a pillbox that doesn't flinch, doesn't need a bathroom break, and most importantly, for the 30 men now face down in the mud, doesn't have a head to aim at. Kovalenko is one of 6 operators running joysticks in that bunker. Hornet 1 is one of 4. Hornets 2, 3, and 4 are already staged in firing pits along a 400-meter frontage. 12 soldiers on the security element handle the perimeter and keep the rearm rig running. Nobody is forward of the wire. The nearest Ukrainian infantryman is another half-mile back, between Kovalenko's joystick and the Russian soldier who just wet himself sits a 10-kilometer stretch of the Provosky front that Ukraine has quietly turned into the first fully robotic sector in modern warfare. The Russians don't know that yet. 200 meters north, Hornet 2 opens up on the Russian right flank. Same robot, same rhythm. The Russian platoon is now taking fire from 2 angles with no way to close on either without crossing open ground under 2 heavy machine guns. Bound and cover only works if the other side has to duck when you fire back. The Russian commander watches his platoon eating dirt on his display and orders the lead BMP's gunner to put the autocannon on Hornet 1's pit. At 600 meters, a 30mm autocannon outranges a 50 cal by over a kilometer. The BMP lights up Hornet 1's thermal plume, and the 2A42 autocannon starts walking bursts across the tree line at 10 rounds per second. Hornet 1's turret rotates for cover. Kovalenko has about 4 seconds before the gunner finds his range. He doesn't need 4 seconds. He needs Spike 1. A small wheeled robot breaks from a hedgerow 300 meters east. Silent electric motor, 4 rubber tires, a bulging payload strapped to the chassis that looks like a car battery duct-taped to a shopping cart. Spike 1 crosses 280 meters of broken ground in 56 seconds. The BMP gunner, still walking autocannon, bursts into Hornet 1's hedgerow, never sees the shopping cart rolling up on his 6. Detonation. The rear half of the BMP is thrown into the next field. The wreck coasts 8 meters on momentum and stops. Hatches pop. The crew tumbles out into the furrow and low crawls for the tree line. What just rolled up on them was the Rattled S, Ukrainian for honey badger. 60 kilos, 24 kilometers per hour, $16,000 apiece. The pizza delivery driver of the apocalypse. Except the pizza is 14 kilograms of TNT, and it just rang the doorbell with the back half of a Russian armored vehicle. $16,000 in wheels and explosives against a BMP-2 that rolled off the factory line at more than $1.5 million. The Russian commander orders the second BMP forward, push into a new firing position, finish what the first one started. BMP number 2 rolls through the smoke trail of its burning sister vehicle at 25 kilometers per hour. A fiber-optic FPV screams off a tree-line launch rail 400 meters back and threads the smoke at 120 kilometers per hour. The shaped charge collapses into a molten copper spear traveling at 9 kilometers per second, roughly Mach 25 at sea level, and punches straight through the BMP's turret ring. What just hit it was a wasp. Every fiber-optic FPV in this sector flies under that call sign, Wasp 1, Wasp 2, however many the launch team has loaded on the rails. $1,200 apiece. A hair-thin glass cable spools out behind it, like a kite string, carrying video and control inputs as pulses of light at 200,000 kilometers per second. No radio, nothing for the Russian Shapovnik Arrow jamming system on the line to jam. Trying to jam a fiber-optic FPV with radio jamming is like trying to stop someone's flashlight by shouting at it. The signal isn't in the air, it's in the glass. 2 BMPs off the board in 4 minutes. Cost to Russia, roughly $3 million going up in black smoke. Cost to Ukraine, 1 robot still running and 1 drone that isn't. Call it $17,000. On a farm track, a click and a half west, 14 Russian motorcycles sprint down a lane between 2 hedgerows, 2 riders each, doing 60 kilometers per hour. The flanking maneuver the Russian commander had been holding in reserve, hitting the Ukrainian position from an angle the ground robots can't cover. The lane narrows between hedgerows for 120 meters. Russian Orlan 10 reconnaissance has had imagery of this track for 3 weeks. What that imagery doesn't show is a patch of disturbed dirt exactly where the lane pinches, because it wasn't disturbed yesterday. Something rolled into position at 0330 that morning. Spike 2's payload, a Mon 90 directional mine, detonates 30 meters in front of the lead bikes, throwing 2,000 steel fragments across the road in a 60-degree arc. The lead riders go down hard, tires screaming, bodies thrown over the handlebars into the grass. The second rank wheels around and bolts back the way they came. The rest ditch their bikes in the hedgerow and start crawling forward on their bellies, because somewhere past that tree line is a Ukrainian trench their commander still expects them to flank. 20 meters into that crawl, a Hornet in the east flank pit picks up thermal signatures moving through the hedge gap and walks a 50 cal burst through the brush a foot above their helmets. The crawl stops dead. Nobody moves. That flank is finished. The Russian commander is down both BMPs, his dismounted infantry pinned across 450 meters of open field, and his flanking element stalled in a hedgerow. What he has left is his cornet team, a fiber-optic FPV section at the battalion rear, and a single Lancet loitering munition his battalion commander released control of 8 minutes ago. He makes a call Russian doctrine doesn't train for, but the situation forces his hand. The cornet team sets up in a furrow at 600 meters, a 6-foot launcher on a tripod, a 60-pound missile with a tandem warhead built to strip reactive armor off a main battle tank. A cornet hits a droid. There's simply no droid left. Overhead at 1,300 feet, Owl 1, a $5,000 DJI Mavic 3T, the same catalog the Ukrainian army buys wedding photographers' drones from, catches the launch flash on thermal. Hornet 1's operator triggers smoke and reverses behind a hedgerow in one motion. The missile plows into the empty hedgerow at just under the speed of sound and detonates in a geyser of dirt and roots. The cornet rides in on a laser painted on the target, keep the dot on the hull, and the missile follows the reflection home. Hornet 1 had already stepped out of the dot. The missile chased the last trace of reflection into empty trees. 2.5 seconds, start to finish. But the Russian commander is watching his feed, and he catches the reverse. He sees Hornet 1 pivot on its tracks, and for a quarter second, as the robot rotates, he catches the flat glass face of its thermal optic housing. Glass. He keys his drone team. 2 Russian fiber-optic FPVs lift off from the battalion rear, not aimed at the chassis, not at the turret, aimed at the sensor cluster. The first threads through a gap in the tree line and slams into Hornet 1 at the base of the turret, its shaped charge detonating against the optic housing. Scorched germanium. Hornet 1's primary thermal feed goes black. Kovalenko switches to the backup optic. Narrow field of view. Daylight only. Blind past 400 meters. The second Russian FPV goes after Hornet 3. Same shot, same result. 2 robots now fighting half-blind. Then the Lancet lifts off, a pencil-thin exhaust plume climbing from the Russian battalion rear, 55 seconds of flight time ahead of it. The Lancet is a loitering munition, essentially a disposable camera drone carrying a 3-kilogram shaped charge warhead, cruising at 70 miles per hour, while its operator hunts for a heat signature to lock onto with a click. He's already clicked. The target is Hornet 1. Owl 1 catches the climb 6 seconds in. Wasp 2 claws onto an intercept course and buries itself in the Lancet's nose at 300 meters altitude. Both drones vanish in a dirty yellow flash. The Russian commander looks at his tactical display. Both BMPs scrapped. Motorcycle flank stalled. Cornet team took an FPV through the launcher and pulled back on foot without their tube. FPV inventory, 0. Lancet inventory, 0. 30 dismounts still face down in the mud, 450 meters short of a tree line, still catching 50 cal fire from 2 positions. He'd cracked the code, target the sensors, and it would have worked, given another 30 minutes and twice the drones. He doesn't have either. He gives the only order left: withdraw. That should have been the end of the engagement, except half a mile back in a reinforced bunker, 6 operators are staring at monitors, still showing green status bars across every robot in the fight, and none of them want to stop. Kovalenko keys the command channel. All platforms, push forward. The ground robots push through pre-cleared lanes in the Ukrainian minefield, in bounding formation, rolling northeast across 600 meters of cratered no-man's land, through 2 drainage ditches and a collapsed farm road toward the Russian forward trench line. 400 meters into the advance, the first Russian artillery salvo lands, not on the bunker, on the advancing robots. 4 152mm rounds from a 2S-3 Akatsiya battery, a Soviet-era self-propelled howitzer, essentially a tank chassis with a 6-inch cannon bolted on top, firing from 22 kilometers east. The Russian battalion commander, watching his rifle company withdraw on his own display, had figured out what the Ukrainians were about to do, roughly 90 seconds before they started doing it. He's been walking shells onto the Ukrainian formation ever since the pursuit order went out. The first salvo straddles Hornet 3, fragments against armor, sensor housing gone, Hornet 3 down to one working camera. The second salvo lands 30 meters short of Hornet 2. It loses a track segment, speed drops to 4 kilometers per hour, but it keeps firing. The robots are in the open now. No firing pits, no overhead cover, thermal signatures visible to anything overhead. The math that made this advance safe just flipped. The formation reaches the Russian forward trench line at 06:18, 31 minutes into the fight. Here's the problem with taking a trench. It's anti-robot terrain. Narrow, deep, and a droid's turret can't depress far enough to hit the bottom of it. A PKM team, Russia's belt-fed machine gun, their equivalent of the M240, sitting 8 meters below the lip, can blind Hornet 2 with a single well-placed burst through the sensor housing. And somewhere in the next 400 meters of trench are at least 4 Russian positions the original assault left behind when it pulled back. Because Russian doctrine, even when it's breaking, doesn't abandon dug-in fire support. You don't clear a trench with a Hornet, you clear it with a breacher. Same logic as sending your kid into the room first to check if mom's still mad, except the kid is 60 kilos of TNT, and the room doesn't survive the reconnaissance. Spike 3 rolls out of formation and down a communication trench at 6 kilometers per hour, silent electric motor, 21 kilograms of TNT strapped to the cargo rack. A PKM team at the first bend hears the motor, rises to engage, and watches a small wheeled object round the corner, at exactly trench lip height, with what looks like a stack of anti-tank mines bungee corded to the top. The gunner gets off a burst. Rounds bounce off Spike 3's armored shell and spark against the trench wall. He looks at his loader. The loader is already running. He drops the gun and follows. They clear 20 meters of trench at a sprint and duck around the next traverse. Spike 3 detonates 4 meters from the abandoned position. 2 spikes left. Hornet 1 rolls up to a collapsed trench section and turns the crater into its own firing position, with 700 meters of Russian trench visible down the cut. The Browning opens up. 3 Russian fire positions in the first 100 meters stop returning fire within 12 seconds. 1 because a sandbag parapet collapses under sustained 50 cal fire and the team pulls back. 1 because the position loses its overhead cover and the crew buttons up. 1 because the gunner decides there's a better option than whatever's coming next. He isn't wrong. At 06:24, the rally point takes a direct hit. The 2S-3 battery, working systematically, has been walking rounds across a 200-meter arc behind the advancing formation since the pursuit order went out, and now the bracketing pays off. A 152mm round lands within 12 meters of the rally point. 4 soldiers from the bunker's security element are there running the rearm rig, swapping a belt on Hornet 4, which had cycled back 5 minutes earlier. The blast throws all 4 into the drainage ditch behind the berm. The rearm rig is shredded, feed chute wrecked, belt boxes vented. The crew is down in the ditch, moving but shaken. The rig that was supposed to keep 4 robots fed for the next hour is finished. The next round hits Mule 1, halfway through its second run from the bunker to the rally point with a full load of belts and a charged battery. Direct hit. The logistics loop keeping the advance alive just stopped working. Hornet 1 sits at 17% battery. Hornet 2, 9%. Hornet 3 got its belt swapped before the round landed. Hornet 4 didn't. 4 robots, 1 full belt between them. Kovalenko is staring at a board where every green bar just flipped yellow or red, and the Russian QRF Owl-1 just picked up on the approach lane is 12 minutes out. The pursuit didn't fail. It moved faster than the logistics tail could keep up with. The same problem every army has faced since the invention of the wheel. Your sword arm always outruns your supply run. Turns out robots have the same weakness as any grand army: the supply truck. This is the point where most commanders would consolidate and pull back. Kovalenko sends the last spike forward. Spike 4 rolls down the remaining stretch of trench at 6 kilometers per hour. The Russian company's rear command dugout sits 180 meters east along the line. Reinforced concrete rated for artillery fragments and small arms, not rated for 21 kilograms of TNT detonating at the firing slit. It's been the forward observer team's perch and the radio relay to the incoming QRF for the last hour. The FO team is still inside, working the net. Spike 4 threads the communication trench and parks at the firing slit. The radio operator sees it through the aperture and understands exactly what it is. He keys one last transmission. Position compromised, bug out, drops the handset, and shouts at the FO team. They're already moving. All 3 clear the rear exit trench at a dead sprint and don't stop. At 0633, the Russian QRF, 2 BTR-82As, carrying roughly 2 dozen infantry, rolls down the approach lane at 40 kilometers per hour. A pair of wasps, working the lane, punches the lead BTR through the engine deck and buries itself in the trailing BTR's driver periscope. Both vehicles coast to a stop, smoking from the hatches. Crews and dismounts bail into the roadside ditch and low crawl into the hedgerow, closing the final 400 meters on foot. They reach the Russian forward trench line at 6:37 and find it held by machines. Hornet 2, down to 6% battery, sits in the old company commander's firing position, using Russian overhead cover as its own. Browning tracking the QRF's approach. The QRF commander orders a push. 8 men go over the top of the approach berm. Hornet 2 and Hornet 4 open up from interlocking positions. .50 cal bursts, walking across the berm at waist height. All 8 hit the dirt before clearing the lip. Nobody moves. The QRF commander runs the same math the first Russian commander ran an hour earlier, except he does it in 90 seconds, because he's been listening to that commander's radio traffic the entire drive in and already knows what happens to companies that push this trench. His armor is smoking on the approach lane. His artillery support just lifted fire because Ukrainian infantry from the half-mile deep line is now inside the 2S3's safety arc and closing. His radio to the forward command dugout has been dead for 4 minutes. He keys the battalion net and asks for reinforcement. The next QRF is 40 minutes out. He doesn't have 40 minutes. He has however many seconds it takes Hornet 2 to traverse onto his position, and Hornet 2 is still firing. He looks at what's left of his men. 24 soldiers pinned in a ditch, 300 meters short of a trench line, held by machines that don't get tired, don't get scared, and don't care how many friends you brought. He gives the only order left. His radio operator tears the side off an ammunition crate, writes on it with a grease pencil, and holds it up where Owl-1, orbiting at 400 feet, can read it through its thermal lens. We surrender. If you're into breakdowns like this, hit subscribe. We've got a lot more of these coming. Drop a comment with what you want to see next, and we'll catch you in the next one.